disclaimer, we'll be recording this session.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here today as you come in this morning, this afternoon, whatever your time zone allows. If you can put yourself on mute and then change your name so that it shows your name, your organization, and if there's room, your title and where you sit in your organization. I'm going to wait just one more moment. Great to have everybody here. Ariel, let me know how long you'd like us to wait.
I think we could get started.
Okay, that's great. Well, welcome. You are attending a Discovery Workshop series, Discovery Workshop number 2. Today we will be hearing from haulers and recycling companies speaking from their perspectives on what it's like to be the collectors and transporters of food and compostables. And this is all part of the Improving the Circularity of Compostables Whole System Strategic Planning Initiative. I'm going to shift slides. So we have organized a 2-year project that is a whole system strategic planning project. And at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is bring together a microcosm of the whole composting industry, the whole compostables and composting systems, and create a shared vision and common purpose with clear action plans based on the work that everyone is willing to do. What you see in the chat is a larger overview of the project. So if you'd like more information about that, you can go there. We are working with a really amazing planning team, steering committee on really tightening up and the kind of a really clear summary and description of what our intentions are with this project. And so what you're seeing here is still in draft form. We've been working with them for a while. But this is kind of a high-level view of what this project is. And so this is a whole system strategic planning process. It's a systems change effort, and we're really focusing on engaging pioneers from all parts of the system to come together to create a shared vision and a collective roadmap toward optimizing the circular economy of the U.S. composting industry. And so this broad cross-sector coalition is intending to design an inclusive whole system circularity model for the health of the composting industry that enables decarbonization and reduces soil waste and greenhouse gas emissions, improve collaboration and coordination between all stakeholders in the compostable system, including policymakers, supply chain, solid waste systems, and end users, improve information flow between packaging design and commercial composting processes for the increased value chain effectiveness, identify strategies to direct and process food waste at commercial composting facilities that creates business value for all stakeholders in the compostable system, and shift stakeholder behavior to mitigate contamination and the cost of contamination linked to non-compostable food contact packaging. So why are we here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So a huge part of this 2-year project is the discovery workshop. So with any good strategic planning process, we begin with discovery. We begin with learning what is true for all the different stakeholders. And so what we are organizing is a series of 12 whole system discovery workshops. These we're basically beginning with the piles and then moving all the way through the system. And so we began with compost manufacturers. These are going to be taking place every other week, every 3 weeks from now until September. They're 90 minutes long, and anybody can come, anybody can register. They're at no cost, so we can share. You clearly are here, and if you know others who would like to attend in the future and sign up for the series, we'll be sharing that link in the chat. So these are 90-minute conversations about what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what are ways to better support each other in this system. And then all of this leads to a 3-day whole system strategic planning event using the Future Search model. So that's going to be in September in Denver, Colorado. And then Ariel and I will be co-facilitating the structures of support for plan activation for a year following the event.
We have an amazing group of shared funders. So this effort and what makes it very unique and innovative in this work, this cross-sector, multi-stakeholder collaborative work, is that it is being funded by the networks, by a coalition of
Travelers can play.
organizations. I'm going to mute you. Thank you. Please keep yourself on mute. Yeah, there are 27 organizations that have committed to being shared funders, and they have kind of started the steering committee grouping of these leaders from different organizations, and we are going through a process. So the purpose statements that you just saw that Candy just shared is what we worked on 2 days ago, and generated alignment at the group level on like, what is this initiative really about? And so it's been a really cool process. We're just starting, but it's this collective movement of alignment and coordination and collaboration. And so I just wanted to recognize and shout out to everyone that has opted in. And I'm just going to put, we have, we're going to be doing ongoing sponsorship with regards to this work, and are excited to expand the grouping and the pool of stakeholders that want to opt in and join us. And so if you are interested, please reach out. We are going through a very intentional process of inviting a diverse set of stakeholders from across the system. And as soon as we have that finalized, it'll be the second round of outreach for participation to come to the event. And so please expect that in early May. And with that, there's a funding commitment to come and be a part of the event, and then to register for the event itself. And as Candy mentioned, this Discovery Workshop, this is the welcome to the Discovery Workshop series. So we are on number 2, and we've got 12 of these, and we have done our best bet at sectoring out these different groupings of stakeholder types. And we've got to about 12 different groups. And this is kind of like the basis of who we want to come to the event, and also who is important to gather data from leading up to the event. And so that this is developing a whole systems view from across the system of what are the needs and the challenges. And that data really informs shared understanding to have thoughtful conversations about a strategic plan at the event in September. And so there's a flyer. I'm just going to put it in the chat. You've all registered for this, and our hope is for this to snowball and to grow, and for more people to come. Anybody can come, so please share it in your organizations, share it in your networks, with your peers. This is open for all, and it's meant to be informative. All right, looks like here we go. So I'm going to shift to the process for today. So we have our wonderful haulers and recycling companies here as panelists. We have Amy Lecoq from Recology, Brian Sherman from Cedar Grove, Christy Turner from Scraps, Arlene Howard from Collective Resource Compost, Jason Brown from Denali Collection, and then Jeff West has provided us some responses in the chat. We'll be bringing that in to the conversation to get his voice into the room. So yes, I'm just going to stop my screen for a second. We're going to kind of shift into this process. We have 4 different questions, and what we're going to do is we're going to hear from everybody on question number 1 first, and then we're going to hear from everybody on question number 2, and we're kind of going to go through this together. And if there's additional time, so we're keeping to a tight time frame. If there's additional time, we are going to allow for some kind of cross-pollination between the panelists if they have anything to respond to each other, given what they've heard. And then if we have any more time remaining after that, we're going to open it up to some questions in the chat. So if you do have questions as you are hearing the conversation, please add them into the chat. It's really important that we get a sense of where your head is at and what you're thinking about. We're going to answer as many as we can today, and For those that we don't have time to answer, we're going to compile a Q&A document that the panelists will respond to. They each have a chance to respond in their own way, and then we will circulate that out as a follow-up from this meeting. All right. So I think we can go ahead and start with the first question. And that is, so to begin, and we're going to start with Amy. So how many locations, cities, municipalities, or businesses are you collecting food scraps and or compostables from? When and why did you start collecting residential or commercial food waste and or compostables?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me and including me in the conversation. That's a couple questions, so I'll do my best to answer those. So of the 136 jurisdictions that Recology serves, about 73% of our residential customers receive organics collection, and about 47% of our commercial customers do as well. And that looks different in each state that we operate in. So, for example, all of the cities that we service in King County, Washington, have food scraps collection, and our contracts include the allowance of compostables. In Oregon, some of our coastal cities that we serve have food scraps collection, but it's a vegetative-only program without compostables. But also, we haul consolidated organics from the city of Portland's program, which does include compostables. And then in California, the majority, but not all of our customers include food scrap collections, and those customers have varied inclusion for compostables depending on the type. So whether that be bioplastics or fiber-based. As far as the when did we start? So Recology started the first curbside food scrap collection program for composting in North America, and that was in 1996 in the city of San Francisco. We ramped up smaller programs until 2002 when there was a voluntary curbside program that was initiated. And then in 2009, the city of San Francisco passed the first ordinance of its kind requiring all properties in San Francisco to recycle organics. In Oregon, the first food scraps collection program kicked off in the city of Portland in 2010. And then other cities rolled out after that, like Hillsborough, Beaverton, Forest Grove, and they're still rolling out today across the state. I think in terms of compostables, a lot of those first municipalities that rolled out programs, whether they be residential or commercial, they included compostables to entice participation and get more food out of the trash. But I think what we've seen over time is that with challenges like the varying level of compostability of those products, especially bioplastics, compostable imposters and lookalike materials that make it really hard to differentiate contamination. And then also the fact that once you include a material in a program, it's extremely difficult to remove it. So because of those things, I think what we're seeing is a lot more cities are rolling out with just food-only programs to cut back on that confusion. In Oregon, those programs have been really successful, and then the haulers have assurance that the material they're collecting can be accepted once it reaches the compost facility.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. All right, Brian, we're going to move to you next.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Sherman with Cedar Grove Composting. I'm our Director of Sales and Marketing. And with Cedar Grove, we are located in Puget Sound area of Washington State. So we are kind of a hyper-local operation as far as collection goes. But what we work with is Kings, Snohomish, and Pierce counties in the Puget Sound area. And we currently provide service to over 3,500 commercial accounts in that region. In addition to that, we also work with our partner haulers to accept inbound tonnage as well at all of our facilities. And we're permitted between those two processing facilities to process just over 350,000 tons per year. So with that too, we started our first composting operation of green waste in 1989, but we rolled it out commercially just in late 2004, early 2005 in the Seattle area. And so we kept it to kind of the downtown corridor of Seattle, and we began expanding on it from there. We didn't begin accepting compostable packaging until about 2007 in the area, and from then we've now rolled that out to all of our customers too. So all of our 3,500 customers that we work with commercially are allowed to compost anything that is accepted at our facilities, whether that be food scraps or compostables in themselves too. So, yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Christy.
Hi, everyone. My name's Christy Turner. I'm founder and CEO of Scraps. We operate in the Denver, Colorado market, the greater Denver metro area. We started in 2017 as a small hauler, a bike and trike-based hauler, really dedicated to just serving a very niche, underserviced / non-service market, apartments and condominiums, individual tenants in apartments and condominiums, and sort of expanded from there. Currently, we service about 300 commercial customers throughout the Denver metro. We have one municipal contract with the city of Edgewater. We're a lot smaller than some of the other folks you're going to hear from today. So we have one municipal contract, and we operate in 10 plus additional municipalities, city and county of Denver and beyond, from Golden to the west, to Aurora to the east, Boulder to the north, and expanding we're down as far as Douglas County, so into sort of the Parker DTC area to the south of Denver. We started collecting, so like I said, we started servicing with the intention of servicing residents who technically lived in commercial buildings and apartments and condos who were not being serviced by the city's program. We quickly pivoted into servicing businesses, and with large changes in the market, with purchases of change of ownership and different changes in business combinations among sort of the larger haulers in the area, we ended up finding ourselves with rapid growth in the large commercial sector around 2021, specifically when Alpine Waste and Recycling, which was the only large commercial hauler that was doing organics collection, was purchased by GFL, and GFL's management of the organics collection contracts, them direct with their customers as well as through other haulers, didn't really go so well. So we found a lot of those larger commercial customers kind of coming in our direction, and over time it's become our biggest market. We originally started collecting compostables because, as I mentioned, as a bike-based hauler, we were operating in sort of a last mile solution approach back in the day. It's kind of interesting to think about it now, where our bikes and trikes would collect smaller amounts of material, and then we would partner with existing business customers of Alpine Waste and essentially deposit our material into their 2-yard bins or 2-yard cans that had excess space. Eventually would place our own 2-yard cans strategically around the city. But essentially, we were collecting everything that Alpine Waste would accept. At the time, residents who were composting through the city of Denver's, at the time, slowly expanding municipal program were also all accepting. Ultimately, this was all tied to what A1 Organics was accepting. So, BPI certified compostables and other approved compostable products. From the get-go, we instituted a really rigorous contamination prevention program that's only grown over time. And for that reason, even as things shifted, particularly over the course of 2023 in the Denver market, again, based largely on A1's decision to stop collecting compostable products, we were able to navigate an ongoing relationship with A1 Organics, as well as with other processors, smaller processors in the region. The site that was previously owned by Alpine, then GFL, and now Republic, namely, to continue to bring compostable products, continue to allow our customers to give us compostable products, again, based on that rigorous attention to education and mitigating contamination throughout the process. From even before A1 made the decision to pull back on accepting compostable packaging, we had kind of followed their lead of moving away from BPI certified to CMA approved, and we're still dedicated to that. So all of our customers get sort of on the commercial side especially, a strict onboarding and training process that ensures that any compostable packaging or products they're using are CMA approved. We have a developing back and forth relationship with the folks at CMA. I see some of them on this call today to make sure that we're providing accurate information to our members, to our customers. And yeah, we work very closely with some of the compostable products manufacturers who are also dedicated to following the rigors of CMA. There are some changes in the regulatory landscape here that are pretty exciting, that are opening up some more possibilities for us and for the region that I think we'll get to in some of these forthcoming questions. But yeah, that's kind of an overview of where we are and how we got to where we are.
Awesome. And a couple of comments you may have added for question 2, which is great. So let's move to Erlene. We've got about 9 minutes left for this first question. And so be brief, be bold, and we'll see if we can get any cross-pollination from y'all.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. In Illinois, which is where we're based, we're in Evanston, just north of Chicago. And so in Illinois, the law changed in 2009 to make it legal for the food scraps to be diverted from the landfill. Before that, only yard waste was allowed to be processed at the composting facilities. During the law change, there was one hauler that was working with commercial properties only, and the light bulb went off for me about the same time that the law was changing, but I had nothing to know. I knew nothing about that it was illegal to divert the food scraps from the landfill. A micro hauler, I started in 2010. We had our first haul in June. I hauled for a while in my car with a 5-gallon bucket swap model. That following September was the first time I participated in collecting material from 2 zero waste events that happened on the same day. So that was really interesting to move into that. Of course, we grew. We started, working in trucks and serving a lot more customers. We serve about 35 Chicago neighborhoods besides 50 municipalities above the 3 franchise agreements that we have. And we are working with about 3,200 customers total. And of those, there's 345 customers that are commercial. We work with a couple of corporations that divert from their cafeterias through using compostables. We also work with the Live Nation at Northerly Island. They hire a team every summer to manage their waste stream, and we haul from them. So that is all food scrap and compostables. Let's see. So we continue with the container swap model where we provide for the commercial properties washed, lined, kitchen ready 32-gallon totes. And then each time we come on site, we take those off-site and deliver a fresh batch. And also that's our model with our 5-gallon bucket swap program. We deliver a clean container every time. This program grew out of a passion of mine of wanting to have some option to compost. I wasn't in a position to set up a backyard bin. The light bulb moment was, if it were easy, more people would do it. And I was soon thrown into a role of educator and sales that was very interesting to me. I've really enjoyed being part of the industry and watching it grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Jason.
Yes, hi, Jason. I'm with Denali. Denali's been in business for about 25 years, dealing with industrial food waste, and more recently, in the last 3 years, we bought a company called Organics with an X, and that's been in business for over 10 years. We currently service over 10,000 commercial stops weekly. Um, to tell you where we are, we service every Walmart in the country, either directly or with partners. So that puts us in every state and Puerto Rico. We mainly deal with, it started with clean food waste, meaning zero compostables, no stickers, no ties, no anything going to farm to feed animals. And we've actually started to convert a lot of our stores and routes to packaged waste rather quickly across the country, as quickly as we can. But the business in general started with grocery chains and has evolved to include all types of food generators, whether that's restaurants, hotels, any type of businesses. So we touch a little bit of everything, a little bit everywhere. And, compostables, we'll get into more in the questions, but it's a very small fraction of what we deal with because so much of it went to feed before. But yeah, that's question one.
Thank you. All right, and then I'm just going to read Jeff West from Next Gen Organics, who could not be here today. You may have seen him on the last panel representing the compost manufacturer's perspective as well. So he says, we began collection operations in approximately 2010 and operated in Kitsap County, Washington, including the cities of Bremerton, Silverdale, and Port Orchard. We collected primarily from the local school districts and quick serve restaurants. So question number 2, Candy is going to, I guess we have 3 minutes left. Does anyone have anything to respond to from a panelist perspective, given what you heard? I know we're kind of in an intro, kind of in the introductions, speaking about your organizations, but just wanted to offer that space. And then, okay, I feel that that's a no. Anything in the chat that's coming up for people? Any questions? I think we most likely can move to the second question, but if you guys have any questions about these folks and their operations, now would be the time. I see one from Glenn in the chat. It's a very specific question. I'm curious if anybody has an initial point of view on this. I think this can come up. This conversation might continue we might circle back to this, but
the chat is a really great place to put any questions that you have. What we're going to do after each discovery workshop is we're gathering those questions and then we're working with the panelists afterwards to create a one sheet that shows the questions and then the responses, and we're sharing that out along with the video. And all the videos will be available from the discovery workshops on the YouTube channel for the project. And so I'm going to put the next question into the chat and start the timer for our next section. And so the second question is, are you currently accepting compostable products as part of your collection operation? What do you believe are the greatest opportunities that come with accepting compostable packaging? And so starting again with Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Candy. So Recology services nearly 1 million customers in 136 communities along the West Coast. So the answer to do we accept compostables is it depends. In areas where compostables are part of the city's collection program, we collect it. As both the hauler and the composter in most cases, because we operate 8 compost facilities across California and Oregon. I will say that we don't seek out compostables. And certainly whenever our opinion is asked on the matter, we encourage programs to roll out as food only. And that's because as a vertically integrated company, we are moving towards not accepting bioplastics at our compost facilities because of the many issues that they create. A lot of those were discussed in the previous discovery workshop. Those also, that would in turn affect the acceptance of bioplastics at our hauling companies. Some jurisdictions have already passed foodware ordinances. And so, we have to work with those jurisdictions to update those ordinances and educational materials as well that might include carton bin stickers that showed bioplastics as acceptable. The second part of that question was around opportunities around compostables. I think that, I think we all agree that the main opportunity around compostables is, gaining participants into the programs because maybe it's easier to use or reduces the ick factor. But we've just seen more challenges around compostables than opportunities. And I'll hold my comments on those challenges because I think we'll talk about that further and give other panelists a chance to respond to this question.
Thank you, Amy. Brian.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So we do accept compostable products. We work closely with CMA to accept CMAI approved products. And from that is us working with our commercial customers directly. As Amy alluded to, with some municipalities, there is a bit of difference on whether or not the residential hauler is actually collecting and accepting those on their behalf. Otherwise, it would make its way to us as well, too. So we do see it from both streams, but we do encourage our customers to use compostable packaging, and with that, on our customer base, we're able to work directly and closely with them to alleviate any contamination concerns, and work with them to make sure that they're using the proper packaging as well, too. For us, the greatest opportunities with compostable packaging, which I think a lot of us will touch on as well, too, is zero waste events and companies that have really gone above and beyond to make sure that their entire process is zero waste has greatly realized tonnage that otherwise would not able to be captured. If you're thinking about festivals or Erlene was talking about Live Nation, a lot of concert venues, those kind of things that have made the commitment and transition to go 100% compostable, they're seeing a great skyrocketing in their tonnage totals because food waste that was wrapped up in plastic before would have made its way to the trash. Now it's making its way to the compost. So where we feel that's a huge opportunity is continuing to make it kind of not a guessing game for folks and really increase the participation by taking any of the work out of it, because anything that you're handed is then compostable. So that's where we see kind of the greatest opportunities in that. But with that comes the other hand of it too, of making sure that people are using the right products and items that are accepted within our process, then that will break down too. So obviously the major issue there would be the contamination aspect of that.
That's great. Thank you. Christy.
Yeah, to build a little on what other folks have said, I think the increased awareness around the compostable packaging issue, or multiple issues kind of wrapped up in it, I think ultimately can really help our industry push more consumer awareness around this, and more nuanced consumer awareness around these issues, ultimately helping to push legislation or other changes in the regulatory environment that help prevent so many lookalikes and just proliferation of plastic products from entering the market in the first place, and help to sort of cull the mess that folks like us have to sort through at our level of the process, and instead start to regulate a little bit more strictly what is allowed to come into the consumer environment. Like others, we, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are very strict about educating and sort of surveying our customers to ensure that what they're putting into their bins is CMA approved. We also, hauler or not, we really encourage people to use the minimum amount of disposable products in their, especially in their commercial office environments, commercial food service environments. We do everything we can to connect folks with resources and materials to, perhaps consider switching to, see what it would look like economically to switch to real dishes, real serviceware versus using disposables. And we also do a pretty strong zero waste events business. This year, we're about to close our books for the zero waste event season because we're already booked out through almost October. Even as we're seeing the restrictions and changes kind of continue in the region, we're seeing as a result more folks showing more dedication to a zero waste process, especially at their large events. We also have the Waste No More ordinance in Denver that, although its rollout has been a bit hampered by other citywide issues, on the event side of things, anyone going for a permit for an event within the city and county of Denver has to essentially have zero waste protocols for their events. We already have booked almost 80 this year. We did more than 100 by the end of last year. With our events, we're very strict. We provide zero waste stations and zero waste crew monitors for every single station without exception. And we require that our event partners require their vendors to use only CMA approved products. We're developing relationships that allow us to more cost effectively provide those products directly through our partnership. We also just today signed the contract for as a zero waste valet crew with Denver International Airport. It's a project that DIA has funded through the State Ford Grant Fund to essentially create an elite zero waste valet team to work behind the scenes with all of the food and beverage concessionaires in the B concourse, the largest concourse at DIA. Focusing on back of house first, but really triaging the sort of operational and logistical issues that get in the way of a clean stream of compostables and recyclables as well in this case. Obviously, the volume of compostable products and serviceware versus food is going to be low, but eventually there's the potential to expand this type of program to other concourses and to front of house. But yeah, certainly all sorts of opportunities that we see as we grow and as this conversation evolves.
That's great. Thank you, Christine. 80 zero waste events. That's amazing. Arlene.
Yeah. So yes, we do take compostables. As I already said, we encourage reusables also. We, when somebody approaches us to set up a zero waste event, we walk through all of the possibilities. We also work with our corporate customers around switching to more reusables and definitely to get away from any single-use plastic. Get the ketchup in the little paper cups with the pumper versus the little packets to keep this stream. We also offer staffing for zero waste events. It's not mandatory. We will provide containers and hauling, but we have a crew that will come out and manage the waste stream. We also, with this container swap model, are still hand tipping our containers. So we are, seeing if there's contamination problems and educating the consumers where they're coming from. For example, we have a drop-off opportunity in one of our municipalities, and it has a high religious community that clears out their pantries this time of year, and we've gotten in the past a lot of packaging, and so the community has worked with us to educate that we really just want the food scraps. So this is not a compostable, disposable problem, but this is just people not understanding that they need to separate the food from any packaging. But we do accept compostables in that program. So by accepting the compostables, we definitely recover more food. It is kind of funny sometimes when we're at zero waste events and people see us nesting the, cups or plates or whatever, they get confused and they'll walk to the trash container and dump their food off. And so we're always watching that, that they understand we want the food and the compostables, since all the food is already collected into the container and they're just seeing the compostables. That does create some confusion. We do take CMA and BPI certified material. So we do both. We are happy when corporations start with the back of the house with their cafeterias and stuff, and then obviously the compostables give us the opportunity for them to move into the front of the house. And I think a really important thing is around all of the compostables are not made out of petroleum. And, if it, as much as we can get away from the petroleum based products, I think is the big picture solution that we're looking for. So yeah, that is really important to me. Yeah, so thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Jason.
So we're very limited on where we accept compostables on our current collections because, again, so much of it was going to farm to feed. And then when we switch over to packaged food waste routes, it's usually going to a facility that depackages the material, and that depackaging equipment cannot decipher between compostables and non-compostables. It's just going to remove all packaging. So it doesn't play as much into our routing as some people. Although we do encourage people to use compostables with the hopes that one day all packaging is compostable and we can remove that depackaging equipment, which would bring our costs down significantly because that equipment is very expensive. But from my perspective, I'm not sure there is a large benefit currently today's market of using compostables for haulers. Again, we're talking haulers, and we are a very large composting company as well as haulers. And in places where we control the hauling and the composting, then we can be more liberal and have more controls over that waste stream, where we can do more with our acceptability. But right now, unless the entire market switches to compostables, and we all feel confident that everybody's using compostables, it's going to be hard for us to really expand on that. And then right now, I think more technology is needed in order for us to get there. I think a good example of the issue is look at our current recycle market. Something as simple as paper, bottles, cardboard gets very convoluted, and we have very high contamination rates in our recycle stream, and we've been doing recycling for decades, and we still haven't figured that out yet. So I think it's an education piece, it's a technology piece, it's and technology and education is changing rapidly. And then there is different waste streams of food waste. There's different levels of food waste. It's not like trash where everything goes in a hole. Recycling has a MRF that usually pulls it all apart. Food waste is very different, and depending on the differentiation of the waste stream will dictate the outlet, whether it's feed, whether it's compost, whether it's digestion. And each one can handle different variations of that stream. For us as Denali and Organics, we are in a decentralized model with various outlets that we go to throughout the week. So that changes. One day we can take the compost, and the next day we can go to a farm. And so it just very difficult to manage that aspect, and hard to find uniformity that fits different compost outlets as well, because we could be in Buffalo, New York one day and Syracuse the next. And the composter in Buffalo maybe does windrow and can only take, this material, but we could go to an aeration facility that can take more because it has more technology. So uniformity is going to be the hardest thing to accomplish, but the thing that we need the most. And because there's different ways to compost, then there's different levels of compostability. Another thing that kind of plays a factor is commercial stops are more spread out. And then they vary quite a bit from, one is a post-consumer stop versus one is a pre-consumer stop. We fight different contamination problems at each one. On the retail side too, high turnover on employees a lot of time. Think about your grocery stores and, kids usually start there a lot as baggers or people taking out the trash, and you get a high turnover. So we're trying to keep up with the education on that. That could be challenging at times. As you heard from my predecessors talking, the zero waste events need a lot of controls in order to run these events and really get clean waste stream out of that. Everything from bin guarding to controlling the products that the people are using, the cups and the plates. And it's more expensive to do that. It requires more resources. So it's not always cost effective to where we can be price competitive to other options such as landfill. And sometimes it costs more to do the right thing. And not everybody's willing to do that, but we are seeing a bigger shift to people being more conscientious and wanting to do the right thing. But we need more of that because the more we have it, the more we get a volume to work on our pricing models that way to be cost effective. But I want also to mention that compostable products don't bring value to the compost. So that plays a large factor. At the end of the day, we would all prefer food only, scrape the plates. And then there's other challenges other than just not breaking down in the system with compostables. You have a litter problem a lot of times. So that could be something that, the different outlets won't take plastic. They'll only do fiber only, which I think is a good idea, but also very challenging. We worked a lot with CMA as well. I think they're leading the charge on a lot of that to help us find the right outlets and the right compost technology to where that outlet will stay in business. And it's very important that our outlets stay in business because there's not a lot of outlets. So as a hauler, we have a responsibility to bring a product that they're willing to work with. If we bring them a lot of contamination, then they're eventually either going to shut down because they can't make a valuable product, or they're going to cut us off and make us go farther or not even be an option anymore. So that's where we tend to put our focus as a hauler. I think you're on mute, Candy.
Yeah, thank you. Trying to eliminate background noise from where I'm sitting. Jason, thank you so much. And I'm going to read out what Jeff West shared. And so for question 2, he shared that we collected compostable food contact products from the beginning. We saw it as a way to differentiate ourselves from other haulers and to increase the market share. And so shifting to question 3, and as you see, lots of different experts in their fields, lots of different opportunities to ask this incredible group of panelists some wonderful questions. We're going to take all these questions and work with the panelists to create a response document that we'll share out afterwards. And so please feel free to put all of your questions and curiosities into the chat. And so starting with question 3.
Right. So question 3 is, what have been some of the greatest challenges your operation has dealt with when it comes to collecting and hauling food and or accepting compostable packaging? If your company has stopped accepting compostable packaging or food, why was that decision made? And what would have to change to accept them again? I'll start at the top with Amy.
Okay. I have lots of thoughts here. So first of all, we think it's important to call out the gap in the chain of custody, so to speak, for food scraps. So there's a recognized lack of sufficient capacity for composting organics, but in many places, there's also a lack of transfer station infrastructure. And so haulers have to collect the material en route and then transport it potentially long distances to either a permitted transfer station for consolidation or directly to a compost facility. And sometimes those long distances can negate some of the environmental value that there is in composting. And if there's not a transfer station in place for consolidation, then the hauler has little hope to remove contamination before that material reaches the compost facility. Haulers are often the middleman when it comes to compostables and contamination. So as we said before, the cities choose what's acceptable in their programs. The composters choose what's acceptable as feedstock to their facilities. So if there's not good coordination between the cities and the composters, if there's not robust education, the result is, excuse me, the hauler either faces potential rejection at the compost facility due to too much contamination, or the haulers then having to pay picking fees at the compost facility for contamination removal. Our rates with the cities are set within our service contracts, and so typically the hauler doesn't get reimbursed for those additional costs, and a lot of the contracts with the cities lack mechanisms for collaboration or recovery of those costs as well. Haulers are often responsible for education of the customers and auditing the loads. But I think it's important to think about this from a driver's perspective. When you have 800 stops in a day, it's extremely difficult and impractical for the driver to decipher between a compostable and plastic contamination. We have teams that go out and do waste audits for customers and provide education, but that's an added cost as well. And sometimes there's a missed opportunity for compost facilities to provide specific feedback to haulers about what types of contamination they're seeing, what loads it's most prevalent in, and how the hauler or the municipality or both could make effective changes. One thing I thought was really interesting prior to this conversation, I reached out to some other haulers to get their thoughts on, specific to compostables. And this isn't the case for Recology, but I heard an interesting sentiment, which was, as long as my load gets accepted and it doesn't get rejected, I don't care about compostables as a hauler. This issue definitely has an impact to haulers depending on the structure of the program in your area, but also by and large, haulers don't really have control or influence over what's included in the program. And so as long as they have an outlet to take it to, sometimes they're indifferent. I think as Jason said earlier in his previous response, we have to protect our end market facilities that receive this stuff and think about it from their perspective, because they are precious, they are few, and we don't want to put them at risk.
Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, I think this is going to be harped on a lot. Obviously, contamination is going to be everyone's biggest issue here. And I think Amy brought up a lot of great points from that too. And with Cedar Grove being a processor and a hauler, we see so many different sides of what contamination looks like in itself. And so in us working with our commercial customers, education is such a huge piece, and as far upstream as we can get with everything, we're going to see the loads be cleaner and cleaner on the end. So it's really making sure that they're having the materials to educate either their consumers on site, their back of house and whatnot too, of just proper sorting techniques before we even get to the packaging side of it. With our issues with contamination, it's always the plastic, glass, and metal that we see in our loads. And specifically to that, into this conversation too, is plastic is definitely the most prevalent as far as when dealing with compostable items. There's a real issue across our service area in between haulers and whatnot too, of compostable, biodegradable, CMA approved, BPI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and what is actually accepted and breaking down in our process, to speak from our perspective too. So really that's kind of a struggle that we deal with, and with the state of Washington passing various laws kind of addressing that. And to touch a little bit on kind of Glenn's question from earlier as well, too, is that's where we see vast improvements happening. Is that if you have a white fork and a white plastic fork, one's compostable, one's not, there's almost zero chance that any driver can tell in the split second that they're looking in the container and that kind of stuff too. Plus, then it could be bagged as well. So there's so many different levels of where that kind of contamination can come from and how to mitigate that. And it's going to always come from that point of education and outreach, as Amy alluded to as well. We're responsible for educating our customers and working with municipalities and whatnot to, or even to the state level on, what can be accepted and what is able to break down in our process too. So, it's always that we're wanting to get as much out of the landfill as possible, but there is always the concern when loads are too contaminated that they do need to be rejected, or a customer needs to be educated in a way that they're not just going to have to throw everything into the trash because their consumers can't do it too. So definitely that is our biggest challenge that we see in our operation. We haven't stopped accepting packaging in a perspective of cutting things off. We've just stopped accepting certain items when they don't break down in our process. So kind of as I touched on earlier, the certifications in which certain things are compostable, we're always trying to work with the CMAI items at our facility because it breaks down in our process. So we've taken kind of a step forward into the compostables market of really working with these manufacturers to make sure that's clearly labeled, to get our logo on things that can be, and really providing that kind of thoughtless, for lack of a better term there, way in which the consumer can look at something and be like, this is clearly compostable, this is accepted with Cedar Grove. So that's kind of our perspective.
Thank you, Brian. Really good insights. Really appreciate this conversation so far. Christy.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief and just add kind of a small company perspective to everything that's been said. Again, that customer membership education piece from generator, all the way through to our drivers, insofar as we can address some of those issues brought up by Recology on the difficulty of relying on drivers to identify contamination. That being said, we just still really prioritize that customer education and engagement from the day they start with us, and it is an ongoing process. Our size is really a big factor in how we've approached our decision-making process as the environment has changed in our region around compostable packaging and compostables. When A1 Organics announced its kind of sweeping changes, we weren't necessarily in a position where I felt the company was resilient enough to, turn around and tell all of these commercial customers that we had just invested quite a bit into re-educating, bringing on board, buying a new truck, hiring new drivers, to just say, sorry, we can no longer service you. Therefore, we're about to lose a significant chunk of our market share, and not potentially ride these waves like perhaps some of the larger haulers could do, who have the ability to just kind of sit back and wait to see which way the wind blows, which is kind of the situation we're in now in 2024 in our region, where some of the larger haulers are now getting into organics because it's mandatory in the city and county of Denver for the commercial sector. We had to find other ways to navigate the past year and a half of changes without losing our customers, disillusioning our customers, keeping them engaged, and ideally keeping them, again, sort of helping transform them into more educated consumers more holistically around this issue. We also don't own our own landfill. As I've mentioned, we don't have our own processing yet. So there's considerable expense in having to divert our drivers elsewhere to tip contaminated load at the landfill. Of course, it's also expensive for us if our load gets rejected by A1 or Republic. So really just, again, investing in that education and investing in these partnerships with CMA, deepening our partnership with A1 Organics, like I said, evolving our partnerships with compostable products manufacturers to really just build that resiliency as much as we can has been really, really critical. And then, yeah, you know, we're just kind of somewhat at the whim of the processors that we have available to us to work with up until this time. Although, as I mentioned, we'll get into this in the next question, things are changing in our state on that level.
Thanks, Christine. Arlene.
Yeah, so infrastructure is really something that the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition is continuing to try to help build out. Here in Illinois, we do have a slightly better situation than we have had at different points along the way. I have experienced immediate shutdown of sites that we have hauled to, and you know, thank goodness, well integrated in the community where you know we could switch gears, and so that is a real challenge. We recently, in the last 6 months, have moved to bringing material back to our location and combining our 32-gallon totes into a 20-yard roll-off, which is getting transported. And so that is definitely helping us on a lot of levels, but definitely on contamination, and then having access to lower tipping fees. You know, we have the trucking costs, but the transfer station, the only transfer station in Chicago that takes food scraps, just continually has made that a very expensive and more expensive option. They went through a shakeup a year ago with wanting to switch to the transfer station, was saying that the compost site wanted to switch to pure CMA certified. I happened to be on a long awaited sabbatical and out of the country for 3 weeks. So I wasn't able, Christy, like you were, to help my team work through what to do with that situation. And they started a wide education process with our customers that really was a bad idea. You know, because once we got through to actually working with the CMA reps and the compost site and got out of the conversation with the transfer station, it was much clearer that we could let our customers run through what they had, their BPI stock, and that you know, that they were, you know, just encouraging more you know, that, you know, to get things to be CMA. We'd had a similar shakeup again through the transfer station, that no compostable bags were going to be accepted. And you know, it was very limited that was the rule. And so, you know, I think that kind of riding these waves has been a little bit more than you know, I would really like to see kind of more steady ground, you know, and I think that getting some more infrastructure and rules in place from the manufacturer all the way down to the composting sites, it, you know, will really help with all of that. Obviously the greenwashing has been a problem along the way, that you know, the plant you know, plant-based silverware, you know, well, it's not 100%, and just the tricks that, you know, people ended up purchasing the wrong thing and us coming on site to do an event and saying, sorry, this has got petroleum in it and we can't do it. You know, and then just like wishful recycling, there's wishful composting, you know, and people, you know, make a mistake to put, you know, putting the wrong things in. You know, once they think that they know this green bag is compostable, then all the green bags should be compostable, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, so we have made, you know, a couple of big shout outs to our customers along the way, trying to respond, and but we have continued to receive all certified compostable material and food.
Thanks, Arlene. Let's go to Jason.
So as everybody said already, contamination differentiation is probably one of the biggest challenges that you deal with when as a hauler, right? Our drivers can't determine what's compostable or not. It's very difficult. Even if the markings happen, which I do think is very important that we at least get that far, I think that's a bare minimum. But even still, you put a plastic bag with a green marking on it in the middle of a bunch of food waste. It's not easy to see. The scarcity of outlets, as somebody that operates in every state across the country, I can't stress this enough. It is extremely scarce on compost outlets in general. There's even more scarce on ones that accept food waste. And then of that fraction, it's even way less that accept compostables because of all the issues that they've run into in the past, including ones that we've been involved with, trying to determine what's compostable and what's not, educating the customers, the turnover, everything that we talked about before. Or you can do everything right, or you think you're doing everything right, but they put it in a liner and you can't see inside that liner. So liners, everybody wants a liner to keep the ick factor down. The cleanliness is something that they're concerned with their containers. It causes us havoc because even if it's a clear bag, you still can't see in it. So that's a big problem. I think we need to move away from liners, use paper, even paper bags though, you're not gonna be able to see in it, can't see the contamination. And then another factor that plays huge in our industry is, say we went to 15 stops and then the last stop has contamination, but we didn't see it until we tipped it. You just now ruined the entire load and we're going to have to go to landfill with that load. But I can only charge that last customer for contaminating that load. So maybe I picked up a ton, but they just contaminated a 15-ton load and the landfill fees are $100 a ton. I'm not going to be able to charge that one customer enough for the whole load, and I can't charge the other customers for doing everything right, but the last one screwed it up for everybody. So that plays a big factor as a hauler, one of the biggest factors. And that's a big reason why we've moved away. Another personal opinion of mine, I think compostables is a temporary thing until we get to the point where we're just scraping plates, or we have depack equipment everywhere. And again, depack equipment isn't going to decipher between compostable or non-compostable. It's just going to remove all packaging. So I think down the road, we're either going to do scrape the plates only, or we're going to have depack equipment, and that's how we're going to deal with these challenges. But right now, of all those fractions I just told you, it's even less scarce on depack outlets because it's relatively new technology, very expensive infrastructure to put in place. And I'm actually on the road right now trying to set up more outlets or to have conversations with partners to establish that. But that's if somebody turned us off before, composters can be very picky because they take in that one plastic bag and they grind it and it turns into 1,000 pieces. You just contaminated 1,000 yards, even though you only brought them 1 yard of contamination. So if they shut you off, there's a good chance they're not going to turn you back on until they get some equipment that can handle it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. All right. I'm just going to read Jeff's answer for question number 3. So he says, this is an easy one. Contamination from the generator with constant turnover of employees changes in procurement by those not involved in the recycling effort, and the lack of administrative managerial commitment to the program, the quality of the material was a constant issue. This required us to constantly evaluate and educate even our most established customers.
That's great.
Candy's going to take us home with the last question, and just wanted to comment that the questions that are coming up from y'all are very intentional and detailed, and we want to make sure that the panelists have some time to thoughtfully answer those. So we're going to follow up with you in an email when we get the Q&A answers.
No, that's great. Keep the questions coming. Our final question is, what should other stakeholders in the supply chain, the solid waste management system, and regulators take into consideration when problem solving around all the challenges that you've shared today? So what would be the most helpful? And so we're going to start with Amy.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to you both for coordinating this, and to my fellow panelists. This has been a great discussion. So I have a few thoughts about what could be most helpful. If compostables are limiting the outlets for food scraps, then I think we need to ask ourselves, are they really doing what they intended to do, which was help us get more food out of landfills and into higher uses? Or are they causing more unintended consequences that we need to address? And maybe we will solve that problem with this process. I'm hopeful. I think we all agree that landfilling organics is not the best and highest use for that material. And currently, I'm aware of 3 recycling alternatives for managing food scraps, which is animal feed, anaerobic digestion, and composting. So if we think about that, if compostables get to animal feed, the result is fatality to livestock. If compostables make their way to anaerobic digestion, depending on the type of system used, it's either going to be screened out or there's additional pre-processing that's needed. It's expensive, but generally it's just not permitted. So when we think about compostables going to compost facilities, we start talking about a lot of the concerns we heard today and that we heard in the first discovery workshop, like microplastics, litter, PFAS, loss of certification for your finished products, loss of longtime customers because now they're seeing bits of plastic in their fields because we're seeing so much in the front end. So collectively, why are we pressuring composters to take this material as it is today? I think we have to look at the question of what's the end product we're trying to create, and then work backwards from there. As Jason mentioned about contamination in recycling, if we have to think about contamination, at the front end, we can't just simply have a shell game, the 3-part system. Secondly, I think every city has different parameters around how their organics ecosystem works. And we know there's a lack of composting capacity. We know there's a lack of transfer station capacity. So we have to think about things like, what does the infrastructure look like in Portland versus Sacramento versus Chicago? A product can't truly be circular. A large portion of the country can't keep it in circulation due to, issues with infrastructure. I loved what Arlene said about bringing cars back to home and consolidate those materials into a dumpster. But in our part of the country, you can't do that without land use approval from the state, a transfer station permit from the state, a reload license from local government agency, and a stormwater permit from the state. So it's not that easy, and those permits are costly. We need to have conversations around growing the acceptance and capacity for composting of true organics, like food and green waste. We've talked about only have one outlet for a composting feedstock, and you get rejected due to contamination. Where's that material going to go? It's probably going to go in the trash, which is what we're all fighting to keep from happening. as businesses have to think about the economics of handling this material multiple times to remove something that came in the front that isn't adding value on the back. So if we're truly trying to develop a improved circularity for compostables, I think about all those factors, and I think it harkens back to the first discovery workshop, which was universally testing and proving certification for compostables that truly work in all places. No reason.
Thank you. That's great. Brian.
From our perspective at Cedar Grove, our biggest thing that would be the most helpful would be taking the guesswork out for consumers. It's really ensuring that the compostable items that are in the market, that are being marketed as compostable, et cetera, are truly something that is going to break down. The second piece to that too is that we are a processing facility ourselves, and our finished product is the most important thing to us and our consumers. So it's really meshing those two together to find that right solution of what is that material that is going to be accepted across the board. How can we make that affordable and available to the consumer, and how do we educate the public on best uses of that too? So those are the challenges we see, and something that we're always pushing forward to focus on every day. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Christy.
Yeah, so grateful to be part of this conversation, and yeah, we're kind of homing in on such an intractable, difficult issue, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years, seeing where this all leads us. I think it's pie in the sky, but it would be amazing to get to a place where we have some sort of national standard around what is able to be labeled as compostable or not, the same way that we have, organics labeling standards, certified gluten-free, certified vegan, et cetera. Something that takes some of the, again, some of the confusion and pressure and pain points off of our distinct municipalities and states, but something overarching that can collectively put all of us and consumers on the same page. I think it's going to take a heck of a lot to get there. But yeah, more truth and labeling regulations around not just what is compostable, but also what compost is. I think it's not lost on any of us that making sure we have robust end markets for the finished product is really crucial. Certainly in our state, we would love to see more, again, truth and labeling type rules that help consumers differentiate between a bag of dried manure at Home Depot that's labeled as compost and something that was made locally with local inputs and with all of the attention that we're discussing now, into making sure it's a high value product. We would love to see rules requiring the application and use of finished compost in major development and infrastructure projects. Again, this is specific to our state. There's already some other examples we've seen. I've seen in other states to you know ensure that there's um, that we're closing the loop on the compost market. Yeah, so many other changes in
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Really,
Over here, with our next take for the whole series. Just this we're so work on the composting and coming off the field and possibilities that can process them and use them. So I think that one of the things that really helpful is if the processor would give compostables screen out through its first 90 days through the windrow system in Illinois, it could go with that versus heading directly to the landfill at that point. I think that's important. I think that the mandated we already talked about the green bag can be compostable and compostable and all of those large that's compostable. I really do value having a healthy end product and being able to have all of the food grown in food amended compost in the United States and Illinois. That's no food. Our food, our food grown with chemicals is, maybe 25% as, nutrient rich. And so that is a really important piece for me. I think that taxing landfills maybe a way to at least it's very cheap to landfill compared to what it costs for tipping fees around composting. And I just wanted to clarify, we've never been kicked out of a site or locked out. Personally, what I talked about in the last case was that the site actually closed. So from their own problems. Yeah. So I I do think that standardizing and working to move forward in a positive way is really important for all of our health and well-being and for the health of the planet.
oh, so great. Thank you so much. Jason.
Yeah, I think to be, as far as what stakeholders should invest their time in the beginning or even now, is we need to start evaluating the outlets and their availability of accepting the different types of materials. Almost need to reverse engineer the process before we just start saying mandating food waste and mandating compostables. Let's make sure we have outlets that can take them, because as haulers, we're stuck in the middle. We have to take it somewhere, and we find the places to take it to. So that's starting from the end of the process and working their way back, I think is very important, but also starting from the front of the process. And by front, I don't mean the generator, but the manufacturing. We need to start working with them more and making sure that they're truly doing things that are compostable across the board, not just compost in this one environment, but all the environments, as my predecessors talked about. And again, CMA has been very influential in that part as well. We worked with them quite a bit on that and trying to get at the front of that process to really make sure it works all the way through. Making things easily identifiable is important. But we need more outlets. And, the board has already talked about this, but the more we can create end markets and circular economies of finished compost used in the area is going to be very important, because then composters want our material. They want the food waste. That'll create a demand in that sense. So I think that's important. I think we need to learn from the recycle debacles that we've done with the China wall or China green fence. We don't need a China 2.0. We need to create circular economies, create a demand, and the supply will come. We need to make it easier for new facilities and infrastructure to get started, get off the ground, get built, whether that's through grants or permits or regulatory. We need more infrastructure, and so all the help we can get on that will help haulers, because that'll bring down costs. It'll get us to and from faster. But land isn't cheap. This equipment is very expensive. Metro areas are very hard to find close proximity outlets. I mean, you think about a compost facility or AD, not a lot of housing communities want work that does create a smell or odors at times, or but hard to service a large population if we got to drive 2 to 3 hours away to get rid of the material. So we need to be thinking about that strategically, finding those places, working with the haulers to figure out how far we can go and still get back. And again, I think, me personally, I think we need to push for more fiber packaging. Um, there's still some problems with the moldable fibers, but overall, they blend in more. If they don't break down, they're still usually a brown color and they absorb water. They don't blow around the site, causing litter issues, which is almost as important as some of the other problems that we deal with them not breaking down. So as a hauler, though, it's the outlets is the biggest challenge for us right now, and it starts with compostables and packaging, and that's where we need the help.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to bring in Jeff's voice for the last question. He says, I believe the most effective solution is engineer out the contamination at the source and to continue to improve the technology and processing for addressing it at the composting facility. At the source, education only goes so far. Humans are inherently unreliable to get it right every time. Our best successes came from eliminating all non-compostable materials out of the generator system. If I had my way, all single-use food packaging and serviceware would be compostable. I do not believe it would be possible to have both a recyclable and compostable product and achieve a clean feedstock in either waste stream. And so that concludes our panelists' responses for this piece of the puzzle, this part of the system, this part of the conversation. I'm so incredibly grateful for everybody being here and all the panelists' time. One of the things that we wanted to share is as we move through the discovery workshops, this is discovery work. So this is bringing in the voices from the different perspectives of stakeholders across the system. And so we have 12 of these. We have the link to the flyer we'll put in the chat in a moment. We'll also share it out afterwards. What you can expect after this is we're going to be working with the panelists to gather your questions, get some responses, and we'll share that out along with the video link. But our YouTube channel is live, and so as soon as we can get the video on there, we will. And so we are moving next to the large generators and food service companies. So we're talking about large campuses. We're talking about whether it is large arenas, we're talking about schools, we're talking about large business campuses. And so large generators of food, large generators of compostables, and their perspectives from where they sit in the system. And then we're going to be starting to talk about packaging. We've got a number of workshops about packaging specifically because there's so many different pieces and parts to that story. We'll be moving to certifiers, ASTM labs, and academic researchers, onto professional associations. We've added a piece about technology and about the venture capitalist funding, because as you've heard today, so many of the possible solutions to some of these challenges really are going to involve some big dollars. And there's a lot of incubation conversations out there about how to do this. And then we're going to bring in the municipalities and government agency and regulator perspectives and kind of finish our series with elected officials and policymakers. So again, deep appreciation for all of you, for my co-facilitator, for our shared funding partners. We are building this coalition, and so if you would like to become a part of this, reach out to us and we can tell you more about that. And we look forward to the next conversation. Ariel, anything you want to say in closing?
Nope, just want to say appreciate our panelists for sharing all of their wisdom from their perspective in the system. And we really want to get the word out about these workshops. So please share the flyer in the chat, and we will see you back again if you want to come back on April 18th.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much.
Bye now. Take care.
Thanks, Erlene.
Thank you guys. Great job.
Brian, that was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Have fun.
Yeah, I've stopped, Candy.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that last piece wasn't the long goodbye was not
we
part of what we shared.
Jennifer's still on here. She might be away from her desk.
The awkward long goodbye.
That was great, you guys.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many,
And Amy,
so much
my
richness.
gosh. Getting Amy was so important. She